Let me call to order then the audit committee of Cupertino meeting on April 28th, 2025. Would city staff do a roll call?
Committee member and Vice Mayor Moore,
Here.
Committee member Wu,
Here.
Vice Chair and Council member Mohan,
Here.
Chair Schmidt.
Here. Great. Well, orders of the day, always, I need to learn what those are, but we don't have any that I'm aware of. So right on to the approval of the minutes. Everyone have a chance to read them before? See you nodding in the head, so I have no changes. Any other, well, let's have a motion to approve. How about that?
Moore, I move to approve the minutes.
I will second it.
Great, we've got a motion. Any discussion? Why don't we take a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Unanimous, but if there were any others, you could say nay and whatever. So we've got that approved. There were no postponements that I'm aware. Oral communications. Right, we don't have any. And that brings us to item 2 on our agenda, which is appoint the audit committee chair and vice chair. Why don't I hand that over to Jonathan?
So annually, the committee takes the opportunity or takes the chance to appoint a new chair and vice chair. Typically, this is done in our first meeting of the year, January, because we did not have a full 5-member committee. We decided to postpone it to the second meeting, regular meeting, which is this April meeting. Unfortunately, we haven't had that 5th member yet. However, we just be as close as we can to a full year of a new chair and vice chair. We decided to move forward with this item. Hopefully we'll have a new chair or a new member, a 5th member at our next meeting, which will take place in July. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you all to discuss.
Sheila.
I'd like to nominate Eno Schmidt for another year as chair.
Second that. Moore.
Okay.
Good with that?
Yeah, I guess I'm good with that. Thank you. No, I appreciate the trust you guys put in me. There is a lot of behind the scenes action going on, I think, that we can contribute something. So I'm thankful this is part of it. I think we should have a vice chair too, and I'm wondering, Hangen, are you open to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second year, I've been here for a year.
Yeah.
I started early last year. I've seen kind of how things are ran, and we've had. Yeah, I'm ready to kind of work with to kind of bring some ideas to this community.
And there's certainly some meetings that I may not be able to attend. That you as vice chair would so we can talk beforehand or whatever. I'm sure that's all well understood. Okay, any other thoughts?
Assuming there would be an amendment to the motion. So first motion would
That wasn't really.
chair, and then we can put them together. It doesn't need to be separate actions. It's just essentially just be tacking on.
Okay, yeah, right. Friendly amendment.
Okay. What do we need to do?
You should
At this point, public comment. Have any public?
Right, we don't have any, which is convenient. So then we just take a vote, I suppose, unless there's any other comments. So all in favor of the 2 mentioned nominees, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, so unanimous. Great. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to another prosperous year or
Yes.
whatever. Okay, second item is receive the OPEB and pension section 115 trust performance reports for March 31st, and excited to have our normal representatives here in person. Actually, I did want to say a few remarks before I turn this over to US Bank and or city staff. But I did notice in the report there was some proposed benchmark changes. I was really happy to see that because we've had, I don't know, maybe going back 6 months or so, a discussion of lively discussion with you guys as well as internally here on our committee, and city staff has been involved, I know. So I'm excited to maybe we can focus we've got limited time. It's a cram-packed agenda. It's always that way, right, isn't it? But maybe we can certainly focus on what you were attempting to accomplish by changing these indices and what might be the pros to them. And then I also wanted to add in, maybe you can focus on the fact that one of the reasons we are paying attention to these benchmarks is it's often a way to help us suggest refinements in whatever management approach might be appropriate at that point in time. So I always look at, well, what's the variation between what the portfolio did versus what the benchmark did? That's a starting point. I noticed on the equity side, maybe this is the second point of focus you can help us with in your remarks today, is that there was almost a 3% underperformance by the equity side versus the I'm going to take it, the new index is what I'm presuming the underweight is relating to. So I was trying to figure out why would it be off by 3%, and there may be lots of reasons, but it looked like a couple come to mind. One is there seems to be, from the charts in the package, page 11, 12, 13, those pages, that there's a possibly an overweight in the portfolio to the lowest, smallest cap stocks versus the index. So typically, maybe you can help us understand that is probably a variation. And I think there's probably a country overweight to the US in our portfolio, or the city's portfolio, from what I can tell, but it's not that part's not so easy. And I was hoping maybe in future we could look at maybe some of these main variances. When there's a 3% variance, that's a big enough one to be interested, concerned with or whatever. But it's also a way for us to manage, I think, what's going on. So with those remarks, maybe you guys can take it from there, and city staff will jump in too.
Just go right in?
Yeah.
Good points. Yeah, why don't let's see where we want to get started here. What makes the most sense?
And we've got about 15 minutes out.
Okay.
I don't mean to make you talk too fast, but.
Good. Well, let's start on page 9. Quick review. Make sure I'm not skipping anything. Yeah, let's review the portfolio real quickly. Your OPEB portfolio has roughly a 70-30 allocation, 70 equities plus real estate, and then 30% bonds. So let's go now to your benchmark on page 13. And your benchmarks, we've worked with you on these over time. These are what I call the very broad, and with no negative connotation, we call these the naive benchmarks. In other words, really broad. In other words, we're not looking at S&P 500 and say a mid-cap index and a small-cap index and a developed foreign and an emerging foreign. We're looking at one index globally for equities. And we use the ACWI, we call it. It's the All Country World Index. And net means net of taxes on foreign sourced income. So this is for all equities. So anytime our asset allocation is not in line with ACWI, we're going to run the risk of either outperforming or underperforming, right? The idea of benchmarks, the best explanation I ever heard was it should represent the pond from which you're fishing. And ACWI does that. If you have someone like us who says we take a global approach to the portfolio, we're going to have US stocks and non-US stocks. But in there, we leave ourselves plenty of room to get off of that benchmark because we set large cap and mid cap and small cap and developed foreign and emerging foreign allocation based on our capital markets expectations. And then all of our projection work with, the most efficient fund portfolios. So we're going to be off of ACWI on purpose. And I think that's okay as I look at it. It's still the benchmark the pond from which we're fishing, we are making an active decision to say, here's what we want in mid and small cap. Okay, then going down, the global ag is the benchmark for fixed income. I am recommending, and I'll get to this in a second, I'm recommending we change this. The global ag is sort of the equivalent bond index for all global bonds. We haven't held global bonds, or sorry, we haven't held any non-US bonds for 3 or 4 years, and I don't think we're going to. I don't see anything on the horizon. So what that means is the global ag, which is a global bond benchmark, doesn't kind of really represent the pond from which we're fishing because we're not going to buy non-US bonds. Now, I'd be happy to keep the global ag if you insist, because we look better against it. Non-US bonds have been underperforming. So that's not a self-serving recommendation. Then you've got a global REIT index. Again, it's global. I would suggest a US REIT index. We're not investing in non-US real estate. And last, you've got 2% in the S&P GSI, which is Goldman Sachs commodity index. We don't hold commodities anymore. We used to. And boy, am I glad we quit holding them, because it was not an additive real estate. I'm sorry, an additive asset class. And then last, the cash, FTSE 3-month T-bill. That's your benchmark now. And we're reporting against that. And if you go back now to page 4, I've summarized my recommendations on changes. Right now in the top table, we have equities. I've actually seen this written in several places. It says MSCI All Cap World Free Index. There's no such thing as an All Cap World Free Index. There are indexes that have the word free in them. And I got into a discussion with my operations folks who, buy all of our benchmarks and make them available. And they said they couldn't find one. So I picked up the phone, I called Morgan Stanley, and I dug around in their organization and I said, do you have anything called the All Cap Free? And they said no. So let's clean that up and change it to the AcquiNet. Honestly, that's the benchmark we've been reporting. We've just been mislabeling it. I don't know where that came from. Okay, I'm recommending for the global ag bond index, 29%, we change that to the US ag for the reasons that I mentioned just a minute. I'm now recommending, we have 5% in the REIT index and 2% in the commodity index. I'm recommending we change that to 3.5% in the REIT index, change it from the global REIT to the US REIT. And I'm recommending that we drop the commodity index because we don't own commodities. And we put 3.5% in the S&P FTSE Global Core Infrastructure benchmark. We have added global infrastructure. So we dropped commodities about 3 years ago. And about 2 years ago, not in your portfolio because it's not stated in your policy, but we've added about a 3.5% position in global infrastructure. Global infrastructure is sort of one of these burgeoning new asset classes that we're starting to carve out now. The funds that we are investing in for global infrastructure, I've listened to their pitch a few times, and to boil it down, it's basically a blend of technology and real estate. These guys go around and they buy 5G cell towers and they convert them. They buy cell towers. They convert them to 5G. So if you had to liquidate them, what do they own? A pile of scrap electronics and so little bitty plots of real estate. But it's not really a real estate play, so to speak. It's capturing the massive spending that's going on in 5G conversions. Also, there's going to be a huge build out of the electrical grid in the next few decades from everything we're hearing. There's still a lot of unspent money on the last couple of infrastructure bills, massive bridges and construction projects, highway projects. There's a massive bridge near my hometown over the Ohio River in Cincinnati. They haven't even turned the dirt yet, but it's going to be $1 billion. And we're looking at investing in funds that invest in these companies that stand to take advantage of what is still a massive amount of federal spending for global infrastructure. So those are the changes that I'm recommending and the reasons. Now, if we're gonna add global infrastructure, we would also need to add that in your policy as an allowable investment. And so that would just be a footnote.
Okay. I,
With that, and with that recommendation, we were also planning on circling back to this policy and kind of, there were some discussions in one of our previous meetings that there was some concern with some of the language, so we would be able to clean that up and as well as add this type of adjustments.
yeah, just to clarify, we're not addressing the policy in today's meeting. We're going over a quarterly analysis that.
Understand?
But we will get to the policy eventually this year. It's on our work plans coming up, but I guess I'm going to rephrase some. As far as I'm concerned, we rely a lot on you guys as professional managers to come up with what you recommend as the best benchmark for what we're trying to accomplish from a risk tolerance and a bunch of other perspectives. So personally, I don't have a lot. If you say these are good benchmarks, let's go with them from my personal perspective. But I am a little interested in the pond analogy that you were making. For example, let's go back to the equities question that I kicked this thing off with. It's helpful for me again to look at the benchmark, see that we're underperforming by 3%, and then sort of step back and say, well, are we taking less risk than the index, or are we investing in things that aren't in the index, which appears the major reason. So pond becomes interesting. It looks like the MSCI World Free Index is going to be, if I look on your charts, let's maybe make this interactive again. Your page 11, you've got some description of, I don't know if you restated these, for example, maybe we should go to 12 where you've got the portfolio weights. We can see that there's a little blue box for the 250 million to 2 billion, and I'm going to call those things small caps. A lot of people call the 2 billion to 10 billion, pretty small caps nowadays. To me, I can't fathom these numbers, but clearly the blue chart here, I guess you're comparing it to the new one that you're proposing here, right? Am I getting that right? The ACWI, the new proposed index is what the little gray.
It's the same before and as proposed. It's the ACWI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because the previous one didn't exist.
The previous one, we were using the ACWI as I got to the bottom of it.
I don't know how that happened, but let's not go
I don't
there
either.
right now. So we're actually comparing what the index here is on this little chart on the bottom right side of page 12. Page 12, maybe, Jen. Yeah, down there. And
Yep.
so it looks like so this is my pond question to go to what your introduction was. Are we saying even though the index itself doesn't have much, it doesn't have any that's below, let's say, I'm guessing that the index has got most of it in the 10 billion range, not even in the lower 2 billion range. It's not gonna have much of this lower stuff. So what does pond mean when you're talking about?
Well, that's a good question. That's what I meant when I said before that ACWI is the global benchmark. It's all the stocks in the world.
Yeah.
And as you can see by this chart, it is much more heavily weighted towards large cap
Right.
than the portfolio. And the way we allocate large, mid, small, developed, and emerging foreign in the portfolio isn't based on ACWI, it's based on our capital markets expectations.
Okay.
And I think that's fair. I mean, I like to just point out your equities were 3 percentage points below ACWI in the first quarter of this year.
12 months trailing. Yeah, so let's look at that because that's where our questions are coming.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. Yes, 12 months trailing. You're right.
So 12 months is
Yeah.
a pretty long period of time. And a 3% underperformance of our best benchmark. If I'm having to stand up in public and explain, that's not really what we're targeting, but we underperformed by 3%. That's a significant 12-month variance.
It is. And it's due to the tremendous volatility in the first quarter of this year, where the S&P 500 is down 4.5%, and EFA, which is Europe, Australia, and Far East, is up 3, I think. We have it on here.
But again, this is a 12-month period, so one quarter can certainly distort things, but, you know. Hey, right, okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
So do we have any, as a committee, do we have any, well, let me rephrase, just because I'm talking too much and we want to get an interactive, exchange here. But when you say it's your corporate capital group that comes up with these, is there any leeway for us to say we'd like to get closer to that index? Would you recommend that? Or no, you want us to keep with, is there a corporate capital index that's a better benchmark that we should be monitoring? I come back to, well, if this isn't such a great index or benchmark, then is there a better one?
Yeah, I think another thing that really jumps out of the page is that there's a big delta between the blue bar and the
Right.
inner, like that between the big cap, like more than 50 billion, is it more than 50 billion?
Yep,
Mhm.
yep.
And then the two bars just follow. It's like it's a really big delta. Like
No, it is.
that's
Yeah.
and you mentioned that something along the line of your investment expectation. Like, what is your philosophy there, like behind those?
So every January, we and just about everybody who does what we do, because I read them, we publish our capital markets expectations. We basically say, look, given everything we know about the valuation of securities right now, the demographic changes, and everything we can wrap our hands around as far as important policies, here are our expectations for every asset class. And these are generally very long term. So we publish a 5-year and a 30-year. And we publish this every January. And again, pretty much everybody else does. And I read ours and then I read everybody else's. And this can be done a variety of ways. Usually it's done with you start with a risk-free rate and you add a risk premium for each asset class. So that, and then what we do is we look forward and we say, we also have to predict the volatility of each asset class and the correlation between them so that we can project portfolios. And we can say, we think this will be a portfolio with this kind of return and this kind of variability, standard deviation of the periodic returns. And then we graph those out, we draw a line between them, that's our efficient frontier. And we say, this is where, for a client who wants to be 70-30, this is how we want to allocate large cap to mid cap to small cap to developed foreign to emerging foreign. And also with investment grade, intermediate term fixed income and high yield bonds. That's how we create the asset allocation process. And I can send you that. That's about a 20-page document every January. I can send you that capital markets.
Do you kind of rebalance the portfolio based on that? Is that only once every January?
That's once a year. Now, we're very long-term in our asset allocation, so we do that once a year. So that we know, again, for a 70-30 portfolio, how much do you want in this asset class or not? Then what we do throughout the year is we make very small 1 or 2% tactical changes 2 or 3 times a year. 2 or 3 times. We are not a tactical asset allocator. And we'll say, look, there's a tremendous valuation. Going into the end of last year, the US large cap market was at 20 times earnings. The developed foreign market was at 12 times earnings. So the developed foreign market's a tremendous value relative to the US market. And now it just so happens in the first quarter of this year, the non-US market did much better. Because the valuation sort of sets the stage for that. You need a catalyst, but.
So maybe I can bring you, we were around when we went more detail of number, but we can do it again in the future if there's an appetite. So result of this port, I look at the inception to date number because that feeds a lot into the actuarial assumptions that are going to hit the financial statements of the city down the road here. And if we keep underperforming, for example, we picked a middle of the road portfolio that was 70-30 that basically targeted a 77% over a long period of time. You could expect that kind of a return. They don't want to but that's about what it is. So I guess in the interest of time, I'd like to maybe interact a bit more with you. Any questions from the that we uh, Sheila or Kitty that you haven't said anything yet? If you have something, you better ask it.
I had a quick question. When we discussed this, maybe several months ago, we was going to get out completely from the commodities market. And I know it's a very small percentage, it's 2%.
It's 2% of your benchmark.
Yeah, I don't think we're.
Yeah, we don't have any commodities.
The actual
We've
is zero.
gotten out of it completely.
Yeah. It was possible, but it's not.
Yeah, I think that table with two columns, like if you add actuals, like there's a current.
Yeah,
proposed, Current like allocation.
Right.
That would help. Yeah.
Well, and it's on there on page 13, but. So it sounds like let's suppose somebody, you must get this question a lot. Well, MSCI is a world big index for a reason. It's because it's got everything in it. And what if as a client, we were hoping to achieve what that index does rather than whatever the capital markets internal group that is that even possible or there's?
It is possible. We can
So how is that?
replicate the ACWI index with your asset allocation.
See, for a while, I think I was thinking that was what was happening behind the scenes, and then you would come to us, and again, there's been a personnel change. I'm not saying you, Dennis, necessarily,
I
of
understand.
course, but that, maybe this committee could look at, well, what are the capital market differences between the ASCWI index and the capital markets? And then if we don't have an appetite, for example, to vary by 3% consistently, I don't have an appetite to do that, for example, as an individual, then maybe we could talk about how do we get closer to that index.
We can definitely do that. Now, you're ahead of the index on your equities for the long periods, for 5 years and 10 years.
Yes, that's very good.
Um,
And I'm happy to see that.
and for the last 5 and 10 years, the US market has strongly outperformed non-US markets just until recently.
Yeah, I see on the total equity, just to that, on a 5-year period, I guess the portfolio was at 15.34
Right.
and the index was at 15.18, which
Right.
is, that's very close. I like that because I don't have to explain to anybody why are we different. But on a short-term 1 year basis, it's off by a lot, and it's I guess overperforming on inception to date, but I gotta say, I'm a little skeptical on the inception to date, because we've had a couple of managers over that period of time, and that's, yeah, but anyway.
Understand.
Well, maybe we could, so can we focus this on, I think we've hit on something that I personally wasn't aware of, that there is some variation in the capital markets model that we signed up for versus the benchmark that we've been using. And
Well, you're right. And again, that calls into question, and I'm glad we're having this discussion, the whole purpose of the benchmark.
right.
Is the benchmark there just to provide some perspective against which we can look at performance and say, gosh, I don't know, was that good or bad? Or is it there because that's what we're trying to achieve?
Good question, right. What do you think?
I think it should be the former. And the reason for that is we put a lot of work into the asset allocation work. And if you said, don't use that asset allocation work, just replicate ACWI, we can do that.
Maybe we need to go back to fundamentals and focus more on that asset allocation model. Get to the long-term returns, but to me, the index, if we all are using that as a benchmark, that's a good benchmark. That by as opposed, I can't pull up the capital markets performance.
Yeah.
Other than looking at our portfolio, so it's a little less of a benchmark in my mind.
What we frequently do is we will use blended benchmarks, just like yours. You've got 4 or 5, but we will use S&P 500 for large, S&P 600 or Russell Midcap for mid. And Russell 2000 for small. And just use those, and instead of using ACWI, and then we'll use MSCI EFA for developed foreign, MSCI emerging markets for emerging foreign. We'll blend those together. I think that gives a more true comparison of what we're trying to achieve. That's what we typically do. We don't use ACWI very much.
Well, then why are, I hate to be an outlier when we're in a public arena like we are. It's okay if it outperforms, but when it underperforms, not so good. Maybe there's, and Jonathan, what do you think? Is there maybe room for going back to the drawing board a bit, since these are not in cement or stone, the benchmarks? We've got a benchmark that follows closer to what the capital allocation model seems to indicate.
Yeah.
Then I'd feel more comfortable. Right now, I don't have that.
Because you can see by the bar charts, ACWI is on the bottom right of page 12. ACWI is way more large cap than we are.
Well, yes, we've all just agreed with that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a built-in difference there unless we adjust that.
So we can do either one. We can move the portfolio to ACWI, or we can change the benchmarks to match the portfolio allocation. If we move the portfolio to ACWI, in essence, you're telling us how to manage the portfolio. And all things being equal, I would rather come in and say, you're getting our best thinking. And so that's where we need to.
So here,
bring these together.
I'd make the argument that if we expand it to kind of where it's more indicative of what we're investing in, we're going to be separating that ACWI into individual pieces, right? And then you're going to have to follow it. Instead of having 5 different types of investments, you're going to be breaking that up into 8 or 9, depending on how far you want to break that equities portion, right? Or you can just keep it the way it is, and you say, this is kind of where we want to go with it, or it's a good comparison. Not necessarily what will follow, but this is, I don't think there's a good way of kind of blending the two, right? It's either going to expand the types of investments, and you're going to have to compare yourself to those, or you're going to kind of keep it more general and kind of overall, how are we doing across those various.
I hear you. So how about this as a compromise for what we're saying? We use the best thinking that US Bank can do, which is this capital market portfolio we've signed up for. But you explain in very layman, easy terms, variance analysis as we accountants talk about. So for example, there's a difference because we've taken a bet on small caps. That accounts for 2% of maybe the variance.
The variance, yeah, just an attribution analysis.
An attribution, exactly. If you could give us that, then I think.
Absolutely.
Then we can say, okay, well, that's all
I
right.
think some of the stuff you voiced over, like the global equity outside the US overperformed the US equity Q1, but that was not it's not the norm, it's the anomaly.
It's not what happened over the last 10 years,
Right.
but I mean, nothing beat large cap US stocks over the last 10 years. In other words, diversification didn't pay off. And all of a sudden in the first quarter of this year, it paid off in a huge way. The delta was enormous.
And you can see, Hanya, on that chart on the left, on the bottom, the portfolio is underweight to the information technology, which is basically US by a big chunk.
To
It's like a mirror on the small caps where we're underweight. So that's another indicator of a difference in.
Because we have more in real estate. You can see that.
Yeah, a little
It's
bit
delta
more,
there.
but unfortunately, the percentages, that doesn't impact the portfolio, but. In the interest of time, we really have to move on. I apologize, but this does seem like a good discussion, but Kitty, please.
Yeah, so do we have the global infrastructure, the S&P FTSE Global Core Infrastructure 50/50? Do we have that
No,
in this chart here to look
No.
at? Okay.
no, we haven't invested in it because it's not allowed in your policy.
Okay, so.
It's not mentioned in your policy.
Yeah, so before we're not gonna be looking at the investment policies until October, so I would, of course, be reluctant to agree with this without having any idea how they're performing. And I think it's the global infrastructure in the S&P US, the REIT index.
Unfortunately, those are
We have-
small relative to the whole portfolio, so that the good news is the 63 and the 29 are gonna drive most of the portfolio performance, but this attribution analysis that you're talking about, Dennis. Can you guys come up with that?
Oh, yeah.
And then we can talk specifics with Vice Mayor Moore down the road, because we'll be able to see how each, even if it's a small chunk of the portfolio, but the attribution to the return is.
You bet.
Chair, I'm, while the 1 year between the ACWI and our total equity does have the 3% difference there, I don't want us chasing returns if it's an anomaly, based on the new president and other things. So I look forward to us going back to this policy.
Good. I look forward to that, as well as attribution analysis, maybe in our July meeting. If you guys can work on that, and
Sure.
maybe we'll have a turnaround.
That sounds-
Anything else? Otherwise, I think our motion or our action here is to accept the report. So I think we're pretty close to doing that. Yes, okay. Much appreciate your in-person help with us, and wish we had more time to delve more in depth, but I have these ongoing conversations.
Absolutely.
We can get closer to where we need to be.
Yeah.
Much appreciated your coming. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, why don't we, because we are a little bit under the time constraint here as usual, but item 4 is the receive the internal audit and the fraud, waste and abuse programs from internal auditors Moss Adams, who I guess are on the line.
Right. I just want to point out, there was an attachment that was left out of the agenda packet, which was the validation report. We're in the process of getting that printed and provided to you as a desk item. So it's just something that's we can provide y'all going forward. Is still relatively new to the community to provide as a supplemental report. So with that, I can turn it over to Chelsea.
Thank you.
From Chelsea.
Hi there. Nice to see you all tonight. Really excited to go over the internal audit status report. So this was from the last time we spoke, January 21st through April 21st. So the first project that we have on our list here is the Grant Management Internal Control Review. And I'm happy to report that we actually had the kickoff meeting for this project today. So we are going to hit the ground running on this project and start our analysis here shortly. So hope to have something to report to you all soon about that project. Going into the next project, which is the Special Revenue Fund Process Review. This one really is going to be taking place from August of 2024 all the way through July of 2025. And the reason there's been some delays due to staff capacity on this one. So I think that we are starting to gain momentum on this project. We have begun our development of preliminary observations. And so for next time, we're hoping to complete our analysis and test work for this project, finalize our observations, and develop that draft report. Next on our list here is the recommendation and the validation process establishment. Really excited for you all to hear the progress that we've made from my colleague Maria here in a bit. But you know, this was a whole fiscal year project, and it's a big one because we have developed the initial tracking spreadsheet as well as requested the documentation needed to begin that validating those recommendations. So we're going to continue to validate those recommendations and make sure that the city staff reports are implemented to determine those statuses. So excited to talk about that one with you guys here in a bit. And I think with that, I guess I'm a little confused. Are we wanting to talk about that now, or are we going to wait in a bit?
You can touch on that one now.
Now? Okay, well then I will give it to Maria.
And we're talking
Here.
just about this now. Right. Okay. Thanks. Hi,
Hi
Maria.
there. Hi, good to see everyone. Yes, so I can share a little bit more about this. As Chelsea mentioned, we started this project really to be able to give the city a snapshot into looking at the number of recommendations that have been made related to audits in the past and the great progress the city has made to implement those recommendations over time. So what this report shows you, I'll kind of walk through it in a little bit of detail since it's the first time you are seeing it. We did include any internal audits that have been done since we started working with the city in 2019. We also included external audits in this process. And so what you can see is that there are 78 total recommendations that the city has been given over these years. And we were able to actually review documentation and validate that 45 of those recommendations have been completed, which is really great news and shows a substantial amount of progress from management at the city to implement those recommendations and reduce risks in those areas. There might be some more recommendations that are currently implemented. We sort of haven't gone through all of the documentation, so we're working through with the city to let the city know what we're looking for and what we need to validate some additional recommendations and sort of doing that iterative process to validate a handful more recommendations. So what that means is I hope that in our next audit committee meeting, we're able to show even more progress given that ongoing work. So this will be an ongoing status report. Again, just a snapshot to sort of let you see the progress that's being made on these recommendations over time and really be able to show the impact of this work. Any questions I can answer?
Yeah, Maria, maybe just, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow. Everybody knows, but we've got on the screen a nice summary chart, and I'm wondering if we can maybe review what the columns mean. The total recommendations, I think, are pretty obvious. I guess that's what came from each of the reports. So I get that. Then the open recommendations, not yet completed by the city. What's that column again? What's that mean in terms of open?
Yeah, great question. So really that just means that those are in progress. Again, there's some of those, maybe a handful of that 33 that we're just working with the city to validate. So there might be a handful of those that actually are complete, but we just haven't validated them yet since we just started this process. And we were able to get through 45, but there are a handful more. But the remaining ones are ones that are just in progress. Likely, oftentimes there are different priority levels for when to implement these recommendations. So it doesn't mean anything necessarily bad or a negative indicator or anything like that. I think generally what we're looking for is to see the continued progress of those recommendations being closed and for any high priority ones to be closed as well. And then again, that column C, those are ones that we have validated. So we validated 45 since January. And this is the first time we're reporting. So in column D, where it says reportable recommendations, you're going to see that full number of 45. But in future quarters, when we report this again, you'll see a smaller number there. And that will just show you what the difference is between the total number we validated, which would be in column C, and the number we validated since we reported to you last, so that you'll be able to see that progress.
Great, thanks for clarifying.
Absolutely.
Any other
I had a
questions?
quick question about
Yeah.
what open recommendations are. So it's recommendations not yet completed by the city, and it could also be recommendations not yet validated by you.
Yes, exactly.
So it doesn't necessarily mean the city hasn't gotten to it. The
Right.
30. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I guess as a theoretical question, Maria, some of the recommendations could have had less of a time restriction on them. They were like future looking, let's say internal control changes or something. So when you validate, you're validating to a historical point in time, like maybe right now or when you started, or how do we look at questions like that?
Yeah, we're basing it on the current time. So whether or not they're validated now when we're looking to validate them. Is that what, did I understand that question correctly?
Yeah, I guess so. even though now, tomorrow is quickly out of date, so how current is the validation column? Maybe that's another way, it's gonna be different dates and time and different kinds of recommendations.
You see on the
Yeah,
top
I-
left,
Go
it's
ahead.
validated as of April 17th.
Okay, gotcha.
So
So next quarter, we'll see something with a different date that, so does that mean all of them are? So let's say,
I think
yeah, go.
to answer your question, so and I can totally, I think I understand where you're going with this. So it's validated based on that point in time, and certainly things do change in the city, and that's why it's really important. We do an enterprise risk assessment, as you know, every few years with the city. And so that's an opportunity for us to look at risks again. So there might be something on here several years from now that we look at again, right? Because things do change. And so that's how I would say we sort of do that ongoing risk monitoring. But in terms of this reporting, it's what was the recommendation at the time? Is it validated at the time we're reviewing it? Yes or no? And then later, again, that risk may come up or be reviewed again in the future.
Gotcha, that was my question, thanks. So it was
Yeah.
valid to some point in time in the past.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you. So this is the informational item to receive the internal audit and fraud, waste and abuse program update, correct?
yes.
Okay, so this is what we were handed was the internal audit work program review, which is item 5.
well, it's also this column in their report.
Okay, so my expectation
so
was to hear more.
our mistake. The title is incorrect on the desk. It is relating to number 4, just the wrong title.
4, okay.
The work program is relating to next year's, yes.
The next, okay, got it. So I guess I'm not quite sure how these recommendations, the findings and recommendations kind of fit in with the fraud, waste and abuse
It's separate.
program.
I think it's the internal audit plan and fraud, waste and abuse. So covering anything that was in the internal audit plan for the current year, which this is one of the items that was to go in validate the recommendation that had been previously made. That was part of the audit plan and current.
Okay,
What we could do, if you'd like, in the next meeting, we can separate the two, so that's a little more clear. We were trying to consolidate and seeing that it was already a packed meeting, try to get out of here by 6 o'clock. So if that's the to make it easier in future meetings, we'll separate the two.
understood. Okay, so are we going to be looking at the complaint reports?
That was the first oh, no,
No, it's the second page, John.
that's second.
Yeah,
page.
we didn't get through this
Yeah.
we didn't finish the status report before
There it is.
they jumped over. So yeah, Chelsea, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So getting back to the status, thank you so much, Maria, for talking about that recommendation validation process. It's great to kind of connect the two. The last one on that list, really quick before going on to this page, I just wanted to point out that, you know, another part of our internal audit program is our ongoing internal audit services. And part of that is us being here today, as well as helping with the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline and help monitoring that. So that brings us to page number 2, which is what we're looking at right now, the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline statistics. So the first table, that is showing us what happened so from the January to April timeline, from the last time we met, there was 4 complaints that had come in. 2 currently are under review and 2 have been closed. All 4 complaints were referred to appropriate city officials, and these really involved compliance and ethics. I know, after receiving feedback from you all last time, we did make 2 additional tables. So you'll see right below that first table, one showing the hotline statistics, the lifetime. So the hotline started in October of 2022. We have had 33 complaints in that span. 26 reports have been closed and 7 are still open. So the last table at the bottom right of this page shows those days outstanding. So currently these, the city is still working through them. And so I did want to provide that statistic for you all since you had asked. I will open up for any questions or comments.
Super, Kitty's got one.
Okay, so the days outstanding, you've got 5 that are about a year or more, and that seems unacceptably long. What is accounting for that? And is it a city issue? It's, who's doing whatever investigation on this? And it sounds like the council needs to be made aware of it. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so all 7 of those reports and, including those 5 that have been over, that are, over a year old, they have all been referred to appropriate city officials. Currently, those are sitting with the city attorney, and I know that there has been, there's been some turnover recently with the city attorney's position. We have reached out to the city attorney, and, the city attorney is aware of these 7 outstanding reports right now.
Okay, so we do have a new city attorney, but it looks like the prior city attorney sat on these outstanding reports and didn't do anything.
I would not make that assumption. Investigations do take time, particularly if they're related to upper level management or elected officials. Typically, an external investigator is engaged. So we don't actually know the details of the investigations in progress, but they tend to take quite some time. And we are trying to get more information from the city attorney.
So who has the authority then to find that information out? Is it something that the city council can, in closed session, say we want to have an actual, status update on each and every one of these? Do you have somebody actually working on it, or is it just, gathering dust somewhere? Is it your authority? Is it the council's authority? Who gets to find that information out?
I would say both. So we're trying to follow up with the city attorney and understand the status of these, where they are in the process. And I think it's appropriate for council to also ask the city attorney what the status is. As a reminder, the details, because of California whistleblower law, because we don't want to compromise any investigations, wouldn't be made public or shared unless you're on a need-to-know basis. But the status report is totally appropriate. And if I were in your place, I would ask. Yeah.
Thank you.
Super. Any other questions on this element? I think we're good. Appreciate your adding those extra charts in. I think it's much more for us. It's very responsive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, stay on the screen. I think our action item here is to receive these reports, and I think we received them. Appreciate it. Quarterly activity here. You guys are also up on the item 5, which is now the internal audit work program review. And I'd like to just make a couple of quick remarks before we get into this section too. I've separately had the chance to talk with Chelsea and Colleen, and I think it's very helpful to get your experience on the role of the audit committee. We were just talking earlier at this meeting that we've got a 5th member who's yet to be identified. Usually the 5th member is already on board, but it's a matter of course that we have turnover in the committee. That's just what we have to deal with. But I'm thinking a little bit more clarification on what your experience has been is helpful. We also have questions from the public. What's the audit committee doing? I know I've got a few of those kinds of questions. It is helpful to have a benchmark. The Government Finance Officers Association's got some best practices that some of your reports have alluded to. I know I've alluded to them when I've stood in front of City Council, and so that's best practices that we like to hold ourselves to. And I was rereading it, and I noticed that in there, it says the committee itself should look at its scope every 5 years, or if not sooner. So I just wanted to preface that with, I think what I was thinking or asking you guys to do is just give brief thoughts on what the scope of a best practice audit committee is, and then in maybe our future meeting, the next meeting maybe in July or later, if it's appropriate, have a little bit more in-depth description that might be, not a long involved, but again, what are the resources out there? What have you guys seen? What are we currently looking at? And again, I think I've talked with city staff who's open to that as well. So I wanted to preface this section because you are reviewing your work program for the year. This is kind of an extra little added on cherry for us as the audit committee. But thanks again for you guys coming, and let me turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much. And would you all like us to share our screen, or are you gonna, or would you like to put the presentation back up?
Yeah, if you could share your screen, but Janet maybe is the expert here. What works better?
All right, so
Okay.
for those of you who've been on the committee for some time, we're back again to plan for next fiscal year. We're getting toward the end of this fiscal year. And so we'll do a little bit of an overview of our internal audit function. As Eno mentioned, the committee's role, and then Chelsea's going to present our proposed work plan for this coming fiscal year. Our goal is to get that approved by council before the fiscal year starts. We have a lot of work that we like to accomplish, so we like to be off and running July 1st. If you could go to the next slide, please, Janet. So as a reminder, the city retained us beginning in 2020 to serve as the city's designated internal auditor. We focus on ultimately reducing the city's risk. So we look at internal controls, look at operational efficiency and effectiveness, alignment with best practices, and compliance, all in the surface of reducing risk so that you can serve your community more effectively. We do our work for you primarily under AICPA consulting standards or generally accepted government auditing standards. And what that means is everything has to have sufficient and appropriate evidence in order for us to make the recommendation, and that the recommendations have to be feasible. On the next slide, you'll see the IIA's 3 lines model, and we really like this in terms of being able to really communicate what's our role, what's your role, what's management's role. So the Institute for Internal Auditors put together this lovely graphic that's basically a 3-legged stool. That is how we are transparent and accountable, how we are good stewards of public funds. So the governing body, council, and audit committee operating on behalf of council is really identifying the what. What do we want management to do? What do we want internal audit to look at? And you are ultimately accountable to the community, to your residents, and to the public. Management is then the how. So you say what, management determines based on their expertise how we interpret things. And then we, as your internal auditor, we provide that objective and independent assurance that your strategies are actually being achieved, the policies that you lay out are being achieved, and that things are, again, being done in an efficient and effective way, and you're being good stewards of public funds. You'll see on the right hand there your external assurance providers, and Sophia's here. She's your dentist, right? They come in once a year and they check and see how well did we do things, and they're backwards looking. Internal audit is kind of today, current state, and then we work together to identify any opportunities for improvement, any kind of major risks and controls that we're seeing. So as the audit committee, what you're really tasked with is looking in depth at our internal audit reports, being that liaison to council and saying, here are things that we really want to focus on. In a resource constrained environment, there are only so many things that staff can implement. There are only so many things that we can look at. So what are the most important things? That perspective of being on the audit committee is really critical in terms of focusing council's work every year and focusing staff's work and focusing your strategic plan over the course of several years. So on the next slide, you'll see what goes into our internal audit work program. We take a couple of different things into account. We watch council meetings, we look at resident feedback, we look at kind of what's happening in the news to see what's happening in that external environment. We talk to staff as we're doing our work. We go in and talk to folks about how things are going. We review data and performance metrics, and then we conduct enterprise assessments. So you'll recall we conducted an enterprise risk assessment just recently, and then the city had an internal controls review done several years ago before we started working with the city. We use those results results to help drive our assessment of risk and prioritization. Then we again take those opportunities at what's most important to look at. And as we've talked about a couple of times, we also track implementation. So we've just started that recommendation, validation, and tracking, as well as corrective actions that are taken on behalf of staff. And then we monitor the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. And then on the next slide, we have just kind of that picture of what do we look at, right? So over the course of several years, we want that internal audit function to really look citywide, holistically, from a risk-based perspective. What's the most important thing for us to look at? So down at the bottom, you'll see a big list of city functions. We kind of try to check off all those boxes over the course of several years through those kind of middle boxes, again, that risk controls and performance, so that we are addressing things from the most holistic perspective possible. And I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea now to talk about what we've done in recent years and what our plan is for next year.
Thank you so much, Colleen. So going on to the next slide, this is a great graphic because it really shows everything that we've done so far at the city. So as you see, we have done multiple internal control projects. We have also done performance and efficiency projects, 5 to date, currently working on that special revenue fund process. We've reviewed over 139 policies within the city, had 33 reports at the ethics hotline. We've delivered 52 recommendations. And I think a really good highlight also is that enterprise risk assessment. As Colleen mentioned, this really is a key component into what makes our internal audit programs. And we did that in 2021 and again in 2024. So we've made a lot of progress at the city. So next slide. This also just gives you a graphic of the departments that we've covered through those different programs and projects over the years. So the administrative services, we've hit procurement, we've looked at finance policies and procedures, the budget process review. We're currently working on that grant management internal control review, as well as the special revenue fund process. The city manager's office, this was huge. This was really the development of the fraud, waste, and abuse program, as well as public works. So we have looked at the capital program in 2022, as well as the library construction audit in 2023. That doesn't stop there. We did look at those enterprise risk projects, and those assessments really cover all the different departments within the city. We've had enterprise leadership as well. Policies and procedures, we did those in 2024, and those looked at all the different departments within the city, as well as the recommendation validation that Maria shared with you a couple of minutes ago. So really great progress made within the departments. So next slide. So as Colleen had mentioned, there's a lot of different inputs when thinking about our internal audit projects, looking at those results from the enterprise risk assessment, receiving feedback from both of those employees as well as residents, and looking at performance metrics. So through those results, there's a long list, as you can see, of different types of internal audit projects that we could perform for this next fiscal year, looking at performance projects, permitting efficiency study, a CIP implementation, as well as internal control and compliance projects. So we'll talk about this in a bit, but the council-wide policy review inventory, something similar to what we had done when we looked at all the departments within the city, as well as the finance policies and procedures, but taking a deeper dive in those council-wide policies. A citywide internal control review, a review and recommendation of the investment and cash flow policy, as well as credit card testing. And then obviously very important to keep up that recommendation and validation. So that's really program management, making sure that these recommendations are coming into place, as well as that ongoing internal audit services. So a lot of different projects to come and look through. But if we go to the next slide, we have proposed to you 4 projects that we think will be really meaningful for the city at this time and place. So number 1 has actually already been approved by the city council, and that is the council-wide policy review. So This will be very similar, reviewing and providing recommendations to align council policies with best practices. The second internal audit project that we want to focus on is a citywide internal control review. This is very similar to an enterprise risk assessment where, we're looking at the different inputs and outputs within the enterprise or the city. This is really doing a deep dive at those internal controls, specifically within the finance realm, to conduct what's the city's internal control framework, and really what are those important internal controls that are in place to protect city assets and resources. The third proposed project is looking at a review and recommendation of the investment and cash flow policy. So reviewing, comparing to best practice recommendations over the city's investment and cash flow policy. And then last but not least, our ongoing internal audit services. So like I mentioned before, that is, us attending our audit committee and council meetings, preparing those status reports, monitoring the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, as well as that recommendation and validation process, continuing that process and seeing the status and success that the city has made. So next slide, I think after this, we do provide you all with some resources. So these resources really complement what Colleen mentioned in what makes, the internal audit program, the different types of best practices needed, but obviously opening up the floor to any questions or comments for you all.
Chelsea, I'm just wondering, is that you or Colleen in that kayak that's going down?
I wish, that's a great marketing technique. I like that.
Yeah, it's like, great presentation. Any thoughts, questions from our committee?
On slide 9, like I see this like 16 weeks 40,000 and then 8 weeks 10,000. Like what is driving the difference in the weekly rate? Like is it just like you have more staff on number one? That's like if I just do the math, like 40,000 for 16 weeks, that's higher weekly rate than 8 weeks 10,000. Like
Yeah, we don't staff people full-time by week. It's really per project. And so it's an estimate of how long the project will take. That's based on the amount of data we collect, analysis we do, as well as staff time and capacity. And so it really is, we charge the city an hourly rate based on our different staff levels. So it's also a different blend of staff, but it's not one-to-one based on the different type of project.
Okay, so thank you for the report. With regards to the CIP implementation, what is it exactly that you're going to be looking at?
So we don't recommend that for next fiscal year, given our budget, but it was a potential project that came up during conversations with council members particularly. So there was interest in the capital program study that we did a couple of years ago, helping with implementation support. So developing policies and procedures, helping to facilitate an update of the capital planning process, roles and responsibilities, things like that. So that's a potential project, but not one that we necessarily recommend for next fiscal year, just based on budget.
Okay, thank you. Would any of this, for your recommended projects, would any of it cover, vehicle replacement at all? The vehicle replacement policies that we have?
Probably not. That would be kind of an operational citywide policy, which would have been in the policy inventory and analysis that we just presented to you all last month.
Okay, thank you. And then also, would anything cover the credit cards and including Home Depot and other charge accounts that we have?
Yeah, so you see on this potential list, we had credit card testing as a potential project that we could do as well.
Okay, so with regards to that testing, we have the like something that functions as a P card, but we also have the Home Depot account, and there's another account that's able to be charged off of. Would you be looking at all of the potential charge accounts?
Yeah, if we were to do that project, we would gather all P cards, all related credit cards as our sample population, and then we would conduct testing to see if the purchases are in alignment with city policy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had one question about the spreadsheet, the chart that shows departments covered. Sort of footnoting that page, you have something called enterprise leadership, which in 23, which I'm assuming took place in 2023. Is that what the 23 represents?
Yeah, correct. We did a study that looked at the city's governance environment as well as how departments and the city manager's office made decisions. And we did present that to this committee and council. You may not have been on this committee at that time.
No, I think I was.
Yeah.
But my question is that something you would do once a year? What is the recommended?
Well, it would really be up to you all if you wanted to redo that study. What we are currently engaged in is validating that the recommendations have been implemented. So you saw on that chart that Maria presented that several of them have been implemented or are in progress. And I would say for a study like that, unless there's a significant event, we probably want to do that maybe once every 5 years if you have interest.
Okay, so once in 5 years would be the norm?
I think so. Yeah. And some folks are kind of one and done, right? But depending on how much is happening or how much interest you all have in your governance and leadership environment, we can definitely do that more often.
Thank you.
I've got a question about the citywide internal control review. That seems right up the audit committee type of the traditional audit committee. I'm not sure it's within our scope the way it's written right now on the municipal code, but when I look at the GFOA standard best practices, they've got a pretty blanket audit committees look at internal controls. And that's a lot like what I see in industry, which I'm even more familiar with, but can you amplify a bit on what item 2 is going to do? I know you talked a little bit about it, but it seems like a really good project.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this one is really great. It looks at the internal controls, and it's really usually, I like to think of what you think would be material on your balance sheet and income statement. So the processes that make up those material accounts. So obviously looking at cash internal controls, revenue and AR internal controls. What are our internal controls around fixed assets, and how does the city really protect those assets, and how does that work? And so really we look at current policies as well as processes, gaining an understanding with interviews, with different stakeholders involved with, protecting city assets. And then once we understand those internal controls, we do some testing of those internal controls so that we can see that, what we believe the internal controls that are in place, and we'll actually test those internal controls out for recommendations. And then we provide the city, our report really is like a table that provides, recommendations. And we also provide, the likelihood of risk and impact of risk for those, recommendations or findings that come out of our project.
That's very
And
helpful. Go
you
ahead.
recall that the city had a internal controls review done back in 2019. It actually was kind of the start of having an outsourced internal audit function, was having that project done. Since then, there has been a tremendous amount of change made in terms of city policies and processes. Staffing is really different. And so we really think this is the right time to then level set again. Where are there control challenges? Where are controls strong? So then we can really focus our work.
Yeah, I'd like just to observe, and maybe you can comment. later in today's meeting, looking at a letter, we've already all read it, that the external auditors issue as part of their external audit, but it's only done in connection with their financial statement audit, and we can't really rely on it quite in the way that you guys are going to be providing. It sounds like a much more user-friendly internal audit or internal control review that is different than what the external auditors produce.
Absolutely, yes.
Great. So is there anything, these projects have all been not quite approved, that when we forward this report, city council then makes the decision whether to continue, or the city staff is already on board with these, I presume, since you wouldn't bring them to us without having had some discussion already with city staff.
Correct, yeah, so we, Moss Adams and staff discussed what's, both, what they are able to take on as well as our own staff, right? So we can't pile on, even though we would like to, pile on more projects, than what we have the capacity. And so we felt like this was a good blend of what, the city's objectives are. It's not to say that this is the final list. Like last year, I think we had one additional last minute recommendation by the audit committee. When we went to council, we proposed, we presented, this is the audit committee's recommendation, but staff doesn't have the capacity to add that additional project. And so therefore we recommend what Moss Adams and the staff had recommended at the audit committee.
That's very helpful. The reason I'm asking these questions is our action item is to forward this report to city council so we can forward it with our comments or however else we want to go. Kitty, you've got a question.
Real quick for Chelsea, for item 2, you mentioned fixed assets. How are you defining that?
So that would be, the capital assets that the city has on their financial statements. So, you can clearly look at the definition. If you look at the financial statements and the footnotes, it will, give you a definition of what the city deems as fixed assets or capital assets.
Okay, so is that something we could receive offline from staff?
I'm sorry, can you?
From our financial statements, there's a definition of fixed assets. So my question is, what I wanted to get at was whether or not the vehicles that we have, is that being counted, or is it something else, and whatever definitions you're using in the financial statements?
Certainly, we can provide you with our current capital asset policy states. We are in the process of updating that. So shortly, we should be able to provide that to you, but I'm hoping that Greg, our purchasing manager who took the lead on that, would be able to complete it by then. And he's been working closely with finance staff and public works staff to refine some of the definitions and how they are applied.
So we will receive the audit, will receive what we
Yeah,
currently have, and
Correct.
if there's something there that's being updated. Okay, thank you.
What I'm thinking we might as a committee do is have a motion that reinforces our committee view that these projects, recommended projects, should be approved by city council, I suppose, something like that. I don't know what good our forwarding with a recommendation really is, but that's one way we can approach this. What do you think?
Or just approve the recommended action.
Which is to forward the whole report.
Yeah.
And these are recommended projects, so I guess
For the next year.
by default, that means we agree with the recommendation.
The first item says already approved by city council, right? So the second one needs more
Yes.
clarification on what is fixed asset versus capital asset.
We could do that unless,
I think assets are just in general, right? So assets could be capital assets as well as cash, right?
right.
So it's more general,
Okay.
whatever's from in Pauline and Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of the materials, right? what is considered material? If we're, cash is quite material and it's a very touchy subject, same with capital assets, but however, are we gonna inventory pencils? That, are we gonna put our resources towards that? And so I think that's really what they would be focusing.
Good, so why don't we have a motion?
More, I move the recommended action that we receive the internal audit work program and forward to the city council for approval.
For a second? On one second. All right, any more discussion? Think we're good. All in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry. We just need to say it, public comment. Sorry, it's just.
No one from the public,
Okay, great.
right? You're a member.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna change that. So,
So after the recommended motion,
I know, I've got my cheat.
sorry, we were a little backwards. I just wanted to get it on there.
Okay.
Sneak it in right before.
I've got my cheat sheet. I'm sort of refusing to ask public comment when there's no one from the public here. But, okay, thanks.
We can talk to
Please
city
do.
clerk if we still need to ask it.
I'm gonna violate the rule, but okay, appreciate your thoughts. And
There's no one online.
we don't take online,
Oh, they can't ask.
Not for the committee.
They
Right.
can watch, but not.
Correct.
right. So all you out there in the audience, feel free to forward an email to, city staff in particular, or us. But in the meantime, we're at the, motion, we're about to vote on it.
Okay,
So all in favor of the motion? Aye.
aye.
Carries unanimously, so very good. Thank you, Chelsea, Colleen, Maria. And we will see you again next quarter, if not sooner. So,
Hey, quick question. What
Yeah.
is our contract amount with them?
It's set for 100,000 per year, so we'll have to council approve it to the contract.
Because how much was that?
And it's
120.
120.
okay, so item 6, our current next item here is the annual review of the city's investment policy. And I hope we've all read that because it's got some good stuff in it. And I think I just turned this over to Jonathan. Why don't you track us through it? I'm not sure, is Carlos online?
He is.
Okay.
I'll have a quick intro and then I'll hunt it off to Carlos to finish us off. So the investment policy is brought to council or first brought to audit committee each year before providing it to the city council for approval. And it's typically covers the existing time period to the end of the following year. That's one of the changes we had last year. So it covered from when it was adopted till the end of the fiscal year, which is now June 30th, 2025. The objective of the policy is safety, ensuring the preservation of the assets, liquidity to meet the operational needs of the city, as well, followed by you. Chandler has made a handful of recommended changes, which include best practices enhancements, as well as some minor clarifying language. That I'll turn it over to Carlos.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So as Jonathan stated, we did update the investment policy. We collaborated with staff to do that. This is an activity that we undertake every year. It's something that we did upon the engagement of our services. We did a deep dive on the policy, and every year we come back and revisit, and collaborating with staff, we come back and look at different sections, whether they need to be updated or not. Code changes almost every year, not every year, but almost every year. And not all the changes that code implements are necessarily advisable, but they mostly are, and we capture those wherever possible. Oftentimes we get consulted by lawmakers when it comes time to update the policy or to update California government code. So you're always getting the latest and greatest. Having said that, the city's policy is robust. It's in very good shape. It continues to do its job of safeguarding the city's investments and funds. It is still designed to deliver safety, liquidity, and return as his objectives. There are some minor changes for this year. I will summarize them, and then if you'd like to get into the weeds, into the actual red line, I'm happy to answer any questions. The first is that we recommend that the city include just a phrase, a catchphrase that states that credit quality, minimum credit quality requirements applies at time of purchase. You may not be aware, but California Government Code, as it pertains to your investments, always applies at time of purchase. So, for example, if a security gets downgraded beneath the minimum credit quality, California Government Code doesn't require you to immediately sell it. It only requires that when you purchased it, it met the minimum credit requirement. We like to do that because we want the city, and with our advice, to be in charge of deciding when to sell out of a security and whether it's advantageous or not. Obviously, the point is to try not have any securities that get downgraded, but we want to have a policy that basically takes into account any contingency. You currently own federal agency securities. These are securities issued by government-sponsored enterprises and agencies of the federal government. You currently limit yourself to 25% per federal agency issuer. There's a handful of them. They're considered very safe. We are recommending that you up that to 30%. California Government Code currently has no issuer concentration limit. In fact, by code, you could buy one federal agency bond with your entire investment program and let it sit there. That's not prudent. So we helped the city develop a limit of 25%. Given their relative safety and just how liquid they are, we are comfortable going up to 30, and that's a best practice. That's not anything out of code. Thirdly, you currently are allowed to purchase and do own pass-through securities known as asset-backed securities. These are bonds where your principal and interest payments are made back to you from pools of receivables, pools of loans. They're very safe. They're highly rated. They're rated, the ones you own are rated AAA. But every once in a while, uh, uh, the paragraph that allows these is revisited. And a little while ago, not too long ago, lawmakers revisited this paragraph, and they carved out pass-through securities that are issued by federal agencies. And the question becomes, are pass-through securities issued by federal agencies governed by the code paragraphs that discuss federal agencies, or by the code paragraph that addresses asset backs and mortgage backs and all other pass-through securities? So code recently changed. Senate Bill 882 classified mortgage-backed securities that are issued by federal agencies as a federal agency. Your investment program has always treated them that way, and your policy was written to kind of capture it that way. We firmed up the language to make it very explicit, so now it mirrors code a little better. You have language permitting money market mutual funds. You utilize them in two ways. Number one is a sweep vehicle for these investments, which reside at the city's custodian. You also utilize them as a cash deposit tied to your bank account so that when you're not using that cash, you can earn a little bit more yield. That's been a good yield maker for you for some time. You have minimal language that addresses the use of money market mutual funds. We've updated that language to better mirror what's actually in code. It's a little bit more descriptive. And then lastly, the policy had never included local government investment pools. These are pools of investments that are run as joint powers authority. They're allowed under California Government Code 53601, paragraph P, if my memory serves me right. And they are typically a liquidity vehicle, a place to be able to park cash for the short term. They look a lot like a money market mutual fund. The ones that exist in California are highly rated. They're well governed. The money managers that manage them, that they've been hired by the JPA to manage them, they're generally considered pretty strong managers. And the management, the boards that govern these, well, they're made up of public finance officials, just like the people that like on your staff and other treasurer tax collectors and people that are really knowledgeable. They're a good alternative to liquidity vehicles, and we think it's prudent that you have it in your investment policy. That is, one more I didn't include in my memo, but there is one more. California Government Code recently changed with Senate Bill 1489. The staff report captures this in your board packet or in your committee packet. Senate Bill 1489 placed a limit on trade settlement periods. Here's what this means. Sometimes, especially with municipal bonds, when they're purchased, sometimes the settlement, the way that it works is you enter into the trade, and then the money doesn't get exchanged until a few days later. Some municipal bonds, when they're traded, have a settlement period that's called TBD, to be determined. And code doesn't want you to have to be sitting around waiting for that trade to settle for too long. So they placed a 45-day limit on that trade settlement. We incorporated that in your investment policy pursuant to Senate Bill 1489. And we think it's prudent for you to have. Those are the changes that we have for this year. Perhaps you have some questions for me.
Yeah, why don't we cover those? Shall we just go right into the red line investment policy? I think we've got some additional stuff there. Did Carlos or Jonathan, you want to track us through the investment policy, or we can just take questions at this
We'll
point?
take questions on the individual.
Perfect. I know I've got a few, but why don't I throw it open to committee members? Any clarifying questions of what Carlos said or on the investment policy itself? Kitty?
So thank you, Carlos, for item 16, the local government investment pools. That would include something like California class.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Right now, the pools in California that would fall under this qualification would be Cal Trust, which has been around for quite a while, CAMP, the California Asset Management Program, California Class, and you may or may not be aware, I may have mentioned it a few meetings ago, Chandler is about to launch one of these as well. We're not there yet, but there are some that are available right now, and it is prudent to have them allowed under the policy.
Okay, thank you. So I've heard that our Wells Fargo account, we have a government account that's making 3%. And when I'm looking at California class, it's at 4.4%. So what I'm not seeing in this investment policy, and I don't know where this policy should exist, is how much money should we be keeping in the government interest-bearing checking account versus moving it into something like the California class or one of these others that you're mentioning that I have not heard of yet.
Yeah.
So where?
So nothing like that is in the policy, and we don't necessarily recommend it. And the reason for that is because we recognize that funds that flow through the bank account are very fluid. They're very fluid. Sometimes the balances are high, sometimes the balances are lower. It depends on the season, especially when you're collecting sales tax getting passed through, or property taxes from the county, or maybe development fees and all the revenues that you have. Not only that, but it sometimes these pools don't outperform the money market mutual fund that you have. It really varies. So when you lock yourself into actual set dollar amounts, especially when you have a program that may be shrinking or growing, it can put some interesting parameters on there that are not desirable for the operation and management of the investment program. Obviously, that's a component that we as your investment advisor do not manage. That movement of cash is really subject to the cash needs. So that's why usually there are not policies written around that. What you do have instead is you want to make sure that they're included, the options are included so that staff can be nimble enough to be able to jump from one to the other. And you did not have local government investment pools. I'm trying to remember the reason why it wasn't there, but it should be there. We had a discussion with staff, and staff agreed that it's time to add it.
Pardon, to add what exactly? Or just the mention of the investment pools, just to mention it. So there is from the state treasurer some information about the cash sweeping and having a policy regarding the sweeping of cash out, so that you're not holding so much in a lower interest account, and that you have a policy to continue to move it into something that's going to bear more interest. You know, as we knew early last year, we had an account that was growing, not making any interest. So it would be great if we had some policy sitting somewhere to just for the public to ensure that that we're always trying to go for the highest and safest as well yield that we can. So I perhaps staff could make a suggestion on how that sort of a policy could happen within our work program.
Certainly. So last year, when we were discussing with Wells Fargo, our banking institution, that was an option, whether we wanted to sweep the funds into each night and we would earn interest on it. And depending on the market, it could generate more than 3%. However, that would go into a money market fund, which is also where Chandler investing. So if we have a large sum of money in our checking account and it gets swept, and then we also have funds sitting in our investment, you don't necessarily know the left hand and what the right hand is doing. And we could, if we have a limit, which we currently do at 20%, we could be in violation. So at any given night, we could have a greater amount of total investments reaching in excess of 20%. For that reason, another option to the city was this government checking account, which we generate 3%. And on top of that, it's also secured. It's insured by the FDIC. So if there was any issues with not saying that there would be a large bankruptcy or anything of the sort where we lose money, this was to us the best approach. It was both safe, it had a safety component, it was very liquid, and it was also yielding a 3% return, much different than what the checking account we previously had.
Okay, thank you. I guess to that point, I would want to see that written down somewhere. Yeah, make it more concrete that that's what we're doing. And the benefit there is that the public gets that explanation. Because they probably don't even know that it's, it's a checking account right now.
I feel like we did it as info memo, or did we just touch on one of the quarterly reports? We'll take a look and see if we can kind of publicize that a bit more.
It's a bit off topic, but I did try to go find out with the informational memos, did we have the monthly treasurer's report, monthly investment report. I couldn't see I wanted to know what the statement balance was for the most recent month, and I could not see it in those reports. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I used to be able to. There's certain times, maybe it's quarterly, where I can find the account balances for all the accounts. It might be a quarterly report. Don't know.
Just a brief moment. New to this quarter, we started providing all our balances to Chandler. And in their investment report, Carlos, do you know what page that is?
I don't, because this was the report that we passed on to you, but I know that that the committee did not include it in the agenda because you had a tight agenda. Oh, I see, you've got it up. Okay, so if you roll through into the investment section, just keep going. Yep. Okay, you're going to be several pages in. Yep, keep going. Keep going.
I think that all of our accounts.
Keep going. Keep going. So so we passed information on the main portfolio. Back up a little bit. Actually, I'm not seeing it. So you may have the old version here. The updated version that Katie sent you should have, I just know that you probably don't have it in front of you because it wasn't going to be discussed tonight, but there is a page, if I can help you out here, there is a page where it details all the other balances that the city has that Chandler does not manage on behalf of the city, but we're reporting on it. So it's not in that particular report. You should have a copy of it, Jonathan. If not, I'll make sure that you get it. But you'll see that going forward. It's something that the city staff is reporting to Chandler, and we're including it, and you'll be able to see it immediately and discern it apart from the managed portfolio of securities. And that includes the cash.
So what we'll start doing, we'll update it, so when it goes to council, we'll have that updated, and at the same time, we'll provide it to the audit committee. There is going to be a slide in Chandler's report that includes all our balances, both Wells Fargo, Lake, and so you can go to one place and you see all our available balances. At least at a quarter basis.
Janet circulated that outside our meeting, so I think we've got some chance to read that in advance of next quarter. But let me move us a bit into the investment policy itself, which one of our action items here is to forward that to city council. I'd like to make sure we get to it. So let me jump in, and I'm sure other committee members will help me, but just above the prudence section on page 2 of 19, there's a reference to the other two investment policies that are related, the OPEB and the pension trust ones, and I really think the wording might be a little clarified to spell those two out. I mean, right now it reads, the trusts are governed by separate investment policies. That's very good, but there's two investment policies. There's not entitled investment policy statement, City of Cupertino Investment Trust. You know, that's a little bit nebulous to me. So if city staff and it is not opposed, I'd suggest we spell out that there's an OPEB policy and there's a pension trust policy statement, and mention them directly by name. It'll be a little bit more clear than an investment policy statement, City of Cupertino Investment Trust, because I don't think we actually look at one of those, but maybe we will. Secondly, in that same sentence, the audit committee last year on October 31st, 2024 approved the OPEB and the pension trust policy, so we could certainly update that. And I don't know when city council actually approved it. It could have been December 5th or December 3rd. Great, we got, Kitty's got the exact date as well, so we can update those two dates so that we're not a couple of years behind on that. I think that's a very relevant thing. And if you got all those, then I've got another two questions for you. So page 5 of 19, we talk about the AUP, which is very apropos to later, the PUN group. If we get to it, we're going to talk even faster. We'll talk to us more about it, but if you look at the third paragraph on page 5 of 19 of the investment policy, and I'm actually doing it too, under internal control. So it's that third paragraph, an annual agreed upon procedures engagement, all fine and dandy. And we're going to actually look at the actual evidence of that later. It will be conducted by the auditor to assist management in determining the city's compliance with this investment policy. So compliance is the key word in this paragraph. When we go to look at the PUN group's actual AUP, they say it was done for the purpose of increasing understanding of the investment policy. And to me, understanding versus compliance are a couple of big different meaning words. So my question is, can we conform those two at least in future years so that the PUN group is is ultimately looking at whatever word we pick here for this third paragraph. And we've had compliance in there for years. I see Sophie is here. So do you have anything to add on understanding versus compliance?
I think the agreed upon procedure usually is really the determined procedure by the management and us. So the
Right.
wording we can work on it and then to change the wording subsequently in subsequent years, and then so that can be in line with the investment.
So in sum, you're okay if we keep compliance in here, which I personally prefer. The understanding is nice, but I'd rather have compliance. So, okay, it's okay with you guys. So then I don't have a change to the way it's worded right now. So that's an easy fix. And then the last one I've got is a question on the investment policy is on page 13 of 19. The policy talks about duration. One of my favorite topics for everybody that has known me for many years. And so this is going to go right into Carlos's wheelhouse probably, but the duration of the portfolio will generally be approximately equal to the duration, typically plus or minus 20% of a market benchmark, an index selected by the city based on the city's investment objectives, constraints, and risk tolerances. So my question for Carlos is where in the Chandler material is that duration tracked, if it is? So we as an audit committee could say, well, yeah, that part of the investment policy is being monitored by Chandler, for example. You know,
Absolutely.
are you still there? Great, perfect.
Yes. The answer is yes, we do provide it. Yes, we do track it. If you think of all the reason, let's back up for a second to be quick, because I know you guys are trying to get out of here. Duration
Yeah, sorry.
of all the influences on risk and return in the portfolio, in a fixed income portfolio, duration is the greatest. And duration doesn't just mean average maturity. It's an actual function. It's a calculus function, actually. But we monitor duration very closely because it's the biggest determinant of risk and return in the portfolio. We constrain it and we measure it because it's a risk measure versus a similar duration benchmark. We provide that duration number to you in the quarterly reports that we submit to you, and it's compared to the duration of the benchmark to where you can easily discern whether we're in compliance or not. And we also we don't provide the duration of the benchmark, but you do see the every month, but you do see the duration of the portfolio every month in the statements. And both of those are provided to you very regularly.
Perfect. What I guess is I've missed that. So maybe after our meeting, staff could, or you could forward the page on that, because it's not really part of our meeting today. Unfortunately, we don't get to go through your report, but I'd like to look at that page so that I can, in future quarterly sessions, we can say, well, here's what Eno was asking about back in April. Super. Thank you, Carlos.
Sure, staff has that report, and they should be able to give it to you, and I will make sure to highlight it next time that I present it.
Yeah, we definitely get the report, but it's the element of this duration that's in the investment policy that I've never focused on before, and I'd like to see it. So Jonathan, if you could help us with that, that'd be marvelous. Okay, we are under the gun here, so I know we probably all have more questions, but we should forward or have a motion to subject to my changes of the investment policy, I think. I haven't heard others. If anybody have any more? So subject to my changes, if somebody want to make a motion to approve the policy in draft form, subject to the changes the committee has discussed today.
More so moved.
There a second?
I will second.
Sheila seconds. Very good. Oh, and I forgot the public comment, by the way. So for the members that aren't here, thank you for not being here. So that we would have violated the rules if you had been there. So sorry, I didn't phrase that properly. Okay, any more discussion on the motion? Great, let's take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Carlos. City staff.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Yep. So we are gonna get the last two items done, I'll bet you. Item 7 is receiving all kinds of AUPs, which I'm excited to do. But it may take us a moment, so sorry that we got them on the end, but Jonathan and Sophie, is there a way to get us through this in less than 15 minutes, which is our budget? But
I can provide a quick update and things of noted of worth commenting. So yes, there was a single audit performed, and this is performed each year when the city expends $750,000 in funds. The city can receive more than that. It's the trigger is when the city spent. Whether it's received in advance or submitted for reimbursement. And so apart from that, we also had including the investment, which we were just discussing, a storm drain, and lastly, the GAN limit. All three AUPs came back with no findings. However, the single audit did have a couple findings relating more on the process or procedures, not so much on the financial side. And this is largely due to staff turnover in public works. Although it was not to say that the city did not perform it, we just could not verify that it did. So one of which is where the city researches whether a vendor or whoever's providing a service or instruction has either been disbarred with SAM, which is the system of award management, which is conducted by the federal government. So if they have been banned, the city cannot perform or contract with them to perform that service with the federal funds. And then the second was as part of the project, there's essentially a checklist that needs to be performed at the end of each project. The checklist was came back. We did perform those items. The checklist was just never signed by the public works for the vendor. It was subsequently provided. However, it was not timely, and therefore it was a finding. The city has made those corrections in the current fiscal year, so that should not be an ongoing finding. And we will have another single audit because the city is currently is projected to spend over $750,000 in federal funds for fiscal year 2024. With that, I can pass it on to Sophia, who would add a bit more or.
Thank you, Jonathan. So you saw my notes, right? Yeah, that's basically Jonathan has already summarizes that what I was going to say. So I know we are presenting just file and receive the items. So the first one is single audit, like Jonathan mentioned, if the local government spends more than 750. So it's based on expenditures, not based on the money received. And the city was subject to a single audit for fiscal year June 30, 2024. The city spent over $1.2 federal dollars. And so just recap, the findings were related to internal control. So there were no compliance findings. They are just really internal control of the city's process. So we have been working closely with the city to make sure the process is in place, and then also the responsible personnel follow through so that we don't have the same issue next year. And so the other three agree upon procedures, gain limit, and the investment AUP, as well as storm drain AUPs, we came with no findings on those agree upon procedures. And I wouldn't go into details about all the procedures that we performed, but I will be open to and I'm more than willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Let me kick it off with one question. I was able to use ChatGPT or AI and asked, is it a requirement to do a storm drain AUP? And ChatGPT comes back and says it's not actually in the legislation. So I was wondering if city staff or the PUN group can comment on why are we doing it?
I would have to speak with Ursula, who is our environmental manager.
I believe when they passed, this was a tax, but it's something on the parcel, I believe. As part of it passing, it had one of the
Line item.
stipulations, how it was written was that there would be an audit.
Okay, so or an AUP or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's somewhat of an exception, but Cupertino shows up as being one of the cities that does actually do it, even though there are other cities that have storm drains that don't do it. So, okay, thanks,
Maybe
Mike.
how they passed their measure, they'll get it right.
Well, this question comes up every year.
Does it?
Every year we forget.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Any Do you have a question?
Yes, so I was looking at the federal awards findings. So I believe what you're saying is that it's a matter of the city not doing a check, not that they did a check and found that, you know, later on and found that they were using suspended or debarred companies. So we don't know if they, like, what was the results at the end?
So during the single audit, we, staff and the fund group, checked to see if this vendor was disbarred, and they were not. And so, but that is a specific instance. It should have been performed when the contract was awarded or before the contract's awarded.
Okay, and yeah, so I actually went to the SAM website and I applaud you for being. So I could not. So, and then with the quality reports, that was a matter that they needed to be done as the project was progressing, and they did it according to this report after the project completion, so they wanted. Is this an issue with, you mentioned staff, is this something that they need another person to own these types of reporting issues?
So this is one of the tasks that CIP performs. By CIP's the CIP department or division. And so since then, we've had quite a bit of meeting, a handful of meetings to discuss what was performed, what should be performed, what are the requirements, both because it's not necessarily something that's performed every year, it's just as needed. And so they've been educated on what the process is, and discussing it with Sophia. Is these particular findings are not uncommon, especially for if the cities or agencies do not use funds frequently. And so if you have someone that's somewhat new to the position and it hasn't been acquainted with that process, it could be a finding. The problem is, or the solution is, just don't do it again, learn from it. And so we'll have that should not be finding this current year.
Pardon me, are these federal funds left over from COVID? Like, what were these?
They're having to do with the highway planning construction from the California Department of Transportation. So essentially the Caltrans, thank you. They provided the funds, but those funds were essentially passed through for them. And so the federal government provided it to Caltrans provided it to us, and it falls under that general federal funds.
And can you say what project it was? I was trying to figure that part out as well. I have no idea.
Right.
We can get back to you on that one. I don't want to misspeak unless you know.
Hey, Colin?
Yeah, phase 3.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just raise your wallet in your account.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Sheila, Anya, any questions? Okay, I think we're in good shape then. Why don't, this one's an easy one. I will say that we have received these. Thank you very much, Sophia. Glad, I look forward to, oh, I did have one question. I'm sorry while you're there, you guys are in interim for the external audit, and everything's running smoothly. You're able to move forward as planned?
Yes, so we are doing the planning phase, which internally we are planning for 25, and then we are going to kick off in May with the city. So, but right now it's internally we are planning phase. We just like Mosala mentioned, they mentioned about different areas. They mentioned cash, they mentioned receivables, and then capital assets. Those are the areas that we need to evaluate internally and to determine the significant audit areas. And then we will go to the city, and then the interim field work is already scheduled in May.
The reason I bring this up for everyone is interim. It requires the external auditors to rely somewhat on internal controls. And this is one of the first years, because of timing, staff turnover, external auditor turnover, that maybe we'll be able to take advantage of that benefit, as I understand it. So, great.
Yes, of course, because starting in May, that gives us and the city an opportunity to review the internal controls. If we see something, of course, we say something, and then the city has the chance to correct before June 30th.
Right, right. Good. Very good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. So that brings us to item 8, updated budget format implementation action plan. And Christina.
I will be brief. We took Baker Tilly's implementation after implementation action plan, and what we tried to do is anything that was a priority one, align it to either in the current fiscal year budget or to take care of it in fiscal year 26. Any priority 2s, we made those a fiscal year 27, priority 3 is a fiscal year 28. This follows format of the items section the item related to performance measures. Council in their motion, when this went to them, wanted that brought back in October for review. We would like to counter that. We would like to do a strategic plan first. So in the budget that will be published in just a few days, there will be an ask for a strategic plan. And our goal is to complete that strategic plan and then bring performance measures after to make sure strategic goals or visions that the council made. That's the one that's gonna be a little bit off, where it's a priority 1, but we've kind of moved it to the latter half of this coming into fiscal year 27. But other than that, we did try to align everything. I'm happy to report as well that the outstanding capital improvement plan for fiscal year 25 was published in April, along with the outstanding budget at a glance for fiscal year 25 was also published just last Friday. In special projects policy has also already gone and been approved by city council.
I know from my memory of our last meeting when Baker Tilly came, that the budget at a glance was something that came up. And so it's good to hear that that's back out. Any questions from any?
What is the definition of strategic plan? Is that 3 years, 5 years? Like, what is that time horizon?
I believe it's generally at least 5. I'm trying to think back. Marshall Adams has called this out as an area, and there are a few audits, at least I want to say 2 or 3 cities should have one of these. So it will likely be a minimum of 5, but I think some of that will also rest on the council and community outreach in terms of how long we'd like to see that plan be.
My overall comment is there's a lot of changes, a lot going on with the budget format. So anyway, we hadn't had the presentation at our last meeting. I would be we'd have to ask a whole lot more questions, but very helpful. I'm good. Because this one, I don't know, it's kind of, we're forwarded to city council. We did have actually a list of items on our last meeting with Baker Tilly when we forwarded this. So I think we should almost have a motion. But we don't have to. Appetite for how do we forward it to city council? 2 members of city council are sitting here. You guys can relay that we had no changes at this meeting, at least. We don't need a motion, in other words, I'm asking.
Well, you would go to the.
We do.
I think we would need it. Yeah, we would need a motion. So
All right. Let's, is there a motion?
So I move that we receive this, these changes and forward them to city council for approval.
Second. Onion seconded. Okay. All right, any more discussion? I don't think we do. No, we're all good. Let's, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous of the 4 of us here. Very good. Okay, thanks for very efficient presentation, Christina, by the way. That's, now we've got maybe a negative 2 minutes and we'll cover item 9, which is our work plan, which I looked over. It's, had everything in there, I think, that I would expect. Any other comments? Kitty?
I will be asking us to come back for a special meeting. I would have to see what your all availability would be, is to circle back if we can for the quarterly treasurer's investment report ending March 31st, 2025, as it was mistake left out of there was a glitch in the system, so it was not included in the staff report. So I'd love to be able to that in the we'll have you all review it, provide any questions that you may have, and then forward it to council before then within that 45 day window. And so, I would like to, we can do this afterwards, but I just wanted.
As a point of clarification, past when we've been meeting the 45-day deadline, you have circulated the report to us, or maybe I'm getting it mixed up with ACFR reports, but you've sent it to, which you've already done, sent it to the four of us. And we're individually probably, I've already sent some comments. Is that not, you would prefer to have a more interactive 2-hour special design interchange?
Or should it, I actually.
That's just
Or
clear.
like have 20 minutes or 30 minutes of your time to that. It does not need to be a full 22-hour, I'm sorry, a 2-hour production.
Like, I'm open to it. I'm just trying to clarify. Okay. And thoughts from everybody on that change?
That's a,
So what we would be doing is we would try to meet the minimum 3-person quorum. And if anyone is unable to attend, I would ask them to, if they have any questions, to provide those responses or questions, and we'll go ahead and provide responses to those during the meeting.
I have a question on the work plan. I saw a budget format review tentative for October, so that's 6 months from now. Is there an opportunity to see that sooner, like a preview of that, like?
We kind of went
That's
through
for
it in
the
our
next year.
special.
Oh, that's for
for the-
starting July to next year.
It's 26th, 27th.
We have a special meeting February on
February 18th.
February 18th. We've covered a lot of the Baker Tilly presentation, so probably got to delay it until October. Kitty, you have a raising.
For a couple of items, there was, Chair, you mentioned looking at the scope of the audit committee, and I don't know where that fits into the budget, but while we're looking at that, I noticed that on the redone website, we've got, maybe we had this before, but I like that all the financial policies are grouped together. However, I'm seeing like, I want to say maybe 12, 15. There's a lot of policies, and we just have, it seems like we just look at 3, the investment and OPEB and section 115. And I'm wondering if we could be looking at all of our financial policies at some point. Maybe that's a scope question.
Well, let me, the way I was envisioning, since I introduced Moss Adams as I was hoping and I think staff is on board on this, that we could have a 10 to 15 minute or less description from Moss Adams' perspective of what the scope might be following that GFOA best principles. So from there, I was thinking maybe if there is an appetite, we might need special meetings on the scope. If there's a lot of discussion, or well, I can't really foretell how our discussion on that would go, but I'm certainly open to including a separate item, but where I was expecting to occur would be in Moss Adams' next quarter presentation of their internal audit program, because the way I look at internal audit is, well, there's a lot of stuff that we could ask them to do, and they're doing a great job, my personal opinion. So to the extent that the audit committee is comprised of whatever we are, it may be that there's a trade-off between external audit, city staff, internal audit committee doing a variety of things, and where do we put that off in the right way? So long-winded answer to your question. So are you suggesting another point is I've seen on city council that there is a work item about the audit committee's charter. So to some extent, I was thinking, because I haven't talked to anyone else about that particular, other than city staff, what does this mean? And I think you guys are still exploring what it means too. So to the extent that our discussion of what the scope of the committee is can be helpful to whatever that work plan item is, that would be helpful. So that might be an issue for us as well.
From staff's perspective, we want to try to kind of get that past a budget season to come in July with the, if I get the official name, please forgive me. I think it's the TBD list. That's the one that includes it. And so our goal was similar to how we changed the when we updated, we actually did make some updates to audit committee back in 2022, maybe. I think we brought that to audit committee first to get their feedback and then brought that back to city council. Our goal was to follow a similar process because we want to make sure we get input from the committee who might be impacted by the changes, bring that kind of so that everything is there. This may align well if Moss Adams has some recommendations as well to be able to kind of say, hey, here's kind of what the auditor's saying, here's what audit committee is saying, like here's what staff is saying, and then asking council.
I'm not sure we've answered the point. It's well taken. Maybe it's another thing to be reevaluated when we next look at this.
You can talk to Moss Adams and see if it would be available for our next regular meeting, July 28th.
Right.
That's a talking item. With that.
That was my initial thought, was they'd make some 10-minute presentation because they've seen other audit committees in other cities in our area. They know GOFA, but I don't know if that was what you're.
I think so, just to have somebody take a look at what we're doing and making sure that we are what we're doing makes sense. But I'm kind of wondering, looking back at the financial policies, if it can be stretched, that actually fits within our duties, powers, and functions.
I might add, Moss Adams did do an audit years ago, maybe less, where they actually reviewed all of the financial policies in accordance with best practices. So I think at that time, when Moss Adams was looking at the policies, there was a desire by this committee to look at the policies, and Moss Adams kind of said, you know, I think just to make sure they have been updated appropriately and we're following best practices, and Moss Adams said, we're actually the best experts to look at that and make sure they're abiding by our recommendations. So Moss Adams actually reviewed all of our financial policies to make sure they were in accordance with what that audit had recommended. So that's how this committee had previously kind of leveraged the auditors to say they have some of this expertise, they're able to go in and look at those items. But all the policies there, minus the special policy, would have been reviewed by Moss Adams as part of their ongoing review items they have listed in the annual plan.
That wasn't around in 22, but that's the exact kind of interplay that I'm looking to make sure we're all aware of, that we can leverage. So if there was a report, maybe I might have missed it.
Yeah.
That might be addressing your question.
Right, well, I think it could be something that would come back on a kind of a regular basis that we can look at what they had to say about it, but you know, I don't generally look at some of these regularly as they go through the budget. So would all of these financial policies be in our budget book?
I think the one that's currently online is I think if it's a live agenda, if it's feed, not a live feed, if it's a live link, as we're doing the Baker Tilly recommendations, one of them is put all your financial policies that are in the book, put them online.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, that might have been you might have gotten to that page before you've seen the QR code in the budget. So that's meant to be all the policies. These are all more policies that were in the book versus Moss Adams book, not only at those policies, but any internal policies we had as well. So that is kind of all the external facing ones. And then we have our internal facing ones, which are going to be in our, I say big because I'm pretty sure it's going to be big internal policy book. And so all of those will be, so they're just a little bit separated with forward facing versus back of the house. Internal one, kind of you know, how a sausage gets made, it's our day-to-day of how we would do. So when I say those are the ones you see on the website are complete to the ones that should be outward facing, but not inclusive of all financial policies that exist in the city. There's some internal ones as well.
Understood. Also with regards to our assignment to look at budget format, we haven't been looking at the capital budget. We've been looking and focusing on the operational budget always, you know, for a number of years. So I'm hoping that at some point we're going to be looking at the capital budget.
Yes.
And because I think that there's some extra items that we have in there that they're nice to have, but not necessarily need them. And it could be that some things like the prioritization part needs to be expanded and be more transparent, because right now, I can't really tell how things are being prioritized. Something like a weighted matrix that we can point to and see how things are scored, kind of like how VTA will score things. I think that might be helpful, and I understand that when you go to that matrix format, you might end up with a different result or how things now. But it would be nice to have a discussion about how they're picking and choosing.
Our goal is to bring, as we're gonna be bringing a lot of budget format review as we're moving into the open gov side of that software to do the budget for the INP recommendations. And we're doing them in lockstep. So the documents should look very similar to each other. So like there's a format changes for budget will also be format. The IP. So we already spoke to Chatter, Director of Public Works, and Stephen, our CIP manager. Hey, we're going to kind of drag you along with us as we talk format for the budget over this next year.
Great. I really appreciated the budget workshop meeting that we had. We can probably all see that moving towards the more online open gov connection is going to have some challenges for members of the public to get there. You can see it during that meeting. But also it's like how, since we don't look at what's actually in the budget, how will the public have a meeting to actually get their hands on the numbers there and be talking about them? Because we've had a budget, but it wasn't really like talking about what numbers are. Let's go around.
So we have the budget is set to print for this next fiscal year on May 1st. And then we have a study session with the council members, I believe May 9th. And then we'll have the budget study session, its own study session, just the budget on May 15th. And so at that point, we'll be talking about the numbers, recommendations, and updating forecasts, all of that.
Okay, so if you're a member of the public, which one of these meetings is most important to go
May
to?
15th.
Okay.
And then I would say also likely the first meeting in June, which is tentatively scheduled for budget adoption. So first meeting will kind of set the stage, we'll get council feedback, and then the last meeting is what will actually end up being adopted. Those would be the two other.
Thank you.
I wonder if that's a question we can ask Moss Adams, like, is that in the audit committee's scope to just look at the format or actually like the budget? It's like, just curious, what is Moss Adams' like point of view on that? Like, because people think about audit committees, like, oh, they're gonna talk about the money, like the budget, like, but then come with, you're just looking at how it's presented, like format itself.
Good point, and let's raise it in July.
Yeah, I think a lot of cities have a budget and a finance
And a
committee,
finance-
and audit committee, and we seem
Right.
to have some
Okay,
mesh.
we're a little bit over time, but I think very productive. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.